ride your bike?
That's good.
Good to go?
Yeah, we're good.
Good to go? Good to go?
Why not?
Staff ready to go?
Yes.
Not any gooder?
Not any
Are we
gooder.
going to be faster and more
Excuse
efficient?
me.
Yes.
You live in a university town and you just said not any gooder?
That's right.
All right.
Trying to bring us around.
You have to know the rules in order to break them, though.
Call the meeting to order. Note that all board members are present. All staff members are present. Our avid consultant is present. And we have an agenda before us. Any changes to the agenda, Mr. Dean? Can I have a motion for approval, please?
Move the agenda.
Second. Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
I think I should turn this microphone on.
You probably should.
There we
Not
go.
nearly as high-tech as yours.
Yep. All right, that takes us to public comment. Any member of the public wish to speak to us on an item that isn't on the agenda, or if you have to leave early and you would like to speak to an item that is on the agenda, please step forward. Seeing nobody rush to the podium, we'll move on to agency business. We have a consent item, minutes of May 17th.
Move the consent.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded by Mr. Cravoza. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. It takes us to item 2, which is the Davis Woodland Water Supply Project update.
Yes, Chair Souza and board members, we continue to make steady progress on the critical activities to keep the project on schedule for completion in 2016. So what I'd like to do this afternoon is to briefly review some of the recent activities and accomplishments, identify some of the more important activities that we'll be focusing on in the coming 3 months, and then a very brief update on the budget and schedule. This past 3-month period, as we reported last time, we're a participant in the 2012 Cap to Cap event back in Washington, D.C. You recall at our last the meeting in April, we completed our ethics review of the shortlisted DBO teams, and we also took the opportunity to review the agency's various consultant associations with the DBO teams. We have prepared and you approved last month the budget, $10.6 million budget for FY 12-13. We continue to pursue state revolving fund low-interest loans and grant opportunities, and we'll talk more about that on a further agenda item. Woodland, as you know, successfully completed their 218 process, and we continue to support Davis's efforts, particularly through their Water Advisory Committee. In terms of planning and pre-design, as mentioned at our last meeting, we had a very successful workshop with our DBO teams, a lot of useful suggestions that are now being incorporated into the final design of the joint intake facility. We've had a meeting and site visit and numerous conversations with the California Department of Public Health regarding the regional water treatment facility site location. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that later in the agenda, but we've adjusted the location of the site slightly to the north to get us further away from the wastewater treatment plant and to mitigate concerns about aerosols and other contaminants being transported to the site. Something that is in progress right now is a request to the city of Woodland and Davis asking them to verify their capacity in the Phase 1 project. Currently, our project calls for 2 phases, an initial phase of 40 MGD and then a second phase in the future to go to the full 52 million gallons per day. The letter requests each of the 2 cities to break their request into 3 phases. The first phase, we're asking each of the cities, how much do you need from now until 2035 a second phase from 2035 through 2050, and then a final phase after 2050 to go to the full 52. Depending on the responses that we get from each of the two cities, I think we're going to have a significant opportunity to reduce not only the size of the initial phase of the project, but also the costs associated with it. We did award the contract for the site dewatering. That activity is underway. The contractor has installed piping, and we're starting the process of lowering the water level at the pond site so that when we award the fill contract, the contractor can come in, have dry material to excavate and fill the water treatment plant site. We've completed a security study for the joint intake facility, and that information has been transmitted to RD 2035, and they are going to incorporate the agency's security needs into the overall design, final design of that intake facility. A couple of technical memorandums have been completed. Water supply scheduling plan, and this is essentially a memorandum that describes for each of the two cities how much water is going to be available under limiting conditions, specifically when Term 91 is in effect or when we have a low Shasta year and the agency's water right is reduced or curtailed. This tells the two cities how much that curtailment will be in each of those cutback situations. That technical memorandum is in the process of being posted to our website. The other technical memorandum is an analysis of the public versus private operations, both costs, advantages, and disadvantages. This is a question that has come up quite a bit in the past few months. So we've organized all that question and analyzed the pros and cons and also the cost. And that technical memorandum will be completed and posted to our website in the next couple of days.
Yes,
Any questions on any of the regional planning efforts?
Yes. What did your technical memorandum conclude regarding public-private operation comparisons?
It is less expensive to proceed with the private operations, and it describes the reasons for those cost differences in the technical memorandum.
Okay, operations but not ownership.
Operations but not ownership.
It's still publicly held.
Still publicly owned, and you know this is a topic that still needs to be vetted and discussed and reviewed with the decision makers and with people that have asked questions. But I think this will give us a very good basis to start those conversations.
I think two, Dennis. Actually, following up a little bit on Marty's question about the technical memorandum on operations. I mean, we did a lot of this public-private thinking when we were considering whether O would be added to DBO.
Right.
So I assume that those staff reports, which I've directed a number of people to who are interested in this question, at least the themes, if not some of the explicit analysis of that O piece of DBO is folded into this technical memorandum?
Yeah, that's correct, but this really focuses on the question of the cost and the different staffing levels that would be associated with each. We've gotten questions on this from Senator Wolk's office. It's a question that has come up at Davis's Water Advisory Committee. Right. So we thought best to put it all together in a technical memorandum that could be shared with anyone who's interested in that topic. It's in the process of being finalized and should be out within the next couple of days and available.
Discuss or analyze the benefits of private operation being folded into the full bid process, both with regard to the cost of the operation, but even potentially the cost of the life cycle cost of the project.
In my recollection in reviewing the draft a few days ago is that it does summarize those advantages and points that have already been discussed and presented.
I mean, I do think that part of the advantage is the life cycle cost comparison of DBO and DB, public O, and apples to apples. I think almost requires those two things to be compared. The two full life cycle things to be compared.
I believe the memo does cover that, but we will make sure that before it's issued that that analysis or that information is included.
And on the water supply schedule, we planned that out, so all we're linking that. Are there any, interesting conclusions then for us just to high level to the board to be aware of? I mean, it sounds like this is telling us how much is going to be available in the supplies.
But I don't think there are any surprises. I think it just quantifies the amount of reduction that both cities are going to see when there are shortage conditions, either term 91 or a low Shasta year. I think it'll be very useful for the staff to plan, and particularly when it comes to operations of their groundwater supplies, conjunctive use of the groundwater supplies, it'll be very helpful information to know how much they'll be able to count on from the surface water project.
It really almost tells us the flip side question, which is, when are you going to have to draw on your other half of use, the groundwater use? Okay, great.
That's right.
That's all I have. Thank you.
My questions is very close to what Joe was talking about. So my understanding of the body's decision-making on DBO was that it was a matter of looking at life cycle cost and the opportunity for the bidding teams to design a project that they could operate and do it at a very cost efficiently. So I hope that if that has changed, that it's clear, but I hope that if that is still the case, that it would be clear in the technical memo.
No, that conclusion and those benefits haven't changed, and what we'll do is make sure that that's reflected in the memo that gets issued in the next couple of days.
And one of the related items was the potential cost savings for employees for paying people not at the public employee rate. That portion of the savings. I'm concerned about if that's the only reason, and if the only reason that there is a savings is that we pay people less to do the same job, or we don't provide them with a compensation package that's appropriate and fair. That would be a problem for some of us, but my understanding is it's actually quite a significant difference based on several elements, not
Right.
just that.
It's more than just cost that makes the private operation advantageous. There's a lot more flexibility and other benefits that go along with the private operation that the memo gets into.
To follow up a little bit, I would imagine the document also speaks to the benefits of having a private operator that understands the construction of the project much more than, say, a public body would that has not had anything to do with operating plants of similar apparatuses.
Yeah, exactly, and similar to Director Carvoza's comments, it's the life cycle cost, the fact that whoever builds the plant is going to have to operate the plant for 15 years. There's very much reduced risk with problems once the plant starts up, and if there are problems, the contract operator is responsible for correcting them.
And is it emphatically clear to the point that Marty was bringing up, because I know there's a lot of misconception about ownership when you slip in the word private, all of a sudden folks think, oh, you're going to give this away?
It's a very good point. Again, it's as the board knows, it's public ownership and private operation, and we will make sure that point is emphasized in the memorandum.
And then legal documents speak to the severance of the relationship at any point in time. The agency chooses to sever that private operation and go to public operation. Does it speak to that, or is that just in our legal documents of the DBO
Do you recall, Jim, if it
RFP?
talks about the ability to terminate the contract early in this memo? Okay.
It speaks to it. Okay, great. Thank you. Any further questions?
So,
Seeing none, please carry on.
no further questions on planning. We'll move to environmental and permitting. This is very much a continuation of the activities that we've discussed the last couple of meetings. We have submitted our 404 permit application to the Army Corps of Engineers. That allows us to keep on track with completing that process in the July-August timeframe. We've completed CEQA addendum for an alternative regional water treatment facility. That's on your agenda later on this afternoon. And we have completed the public review for the draft initial statement environmental assessment for the joint intake facility. So that's another step in that completion of that process. And we have continued to make progress with Yolo County and have come up and provided them with a draft master permit for encroachment of our project pipelines. And so I think we're making progress to getting that in place. Our goal is to have that master agreement in place and to be able to include that in the request for proposals for the PBO contractors so they'll know exactly what the overarching requirements are going to be. Then they'll have to go in and get individual permits that are consistent with that master permit. In terms of supplemental water supply, continue to make good progress on the ASR work, primarily at Well 28 in Woodland. The overall plan has been developed. We have a injection test that's been developed and coordinated. There are 2 monitoring wells that are being installed near Well 28 for injection test and future monitoring. And in addition to that, the experts at West Yost are working on a geochemical model to analyze the interaction between groundwater, surface water, and the minerals that are in the injected water. In terms of land and right-of-way acquisitions, we continue to make very good progress on all of the right-of-way acquisitions with the exception of the Sierra North Northern Railroad. And we're having trouble getting their attention. So we're going to be working hard over the next several weeks to see if we can't get some traction and get them to engage on the property rights that we need.
Can the county help us there a little bit, maybe?
Yeah. That would be good. I think we're still hopeful that we are going to be able to get them to engage with us, but if not, we would welcome the help.
Well, this rail line that we're talking about is it which one is it in geography?
We need two easements. We need a perpendicular crossing right at the intake facility that goes under their tracks, and then there's a segment of the raw water pipeline from the intake facility over to the regional water treatment plant where we need a parallel easement for a short length.
Okay. Yes, we can assist in contacting the folks.
And then we continue to work on the necessary easements with Conway Preservation Group, and we also have a realignment on the Davis treated water pipeline that's going to require a different set of property rights. That's known as the Harlan Bypass. Property owner's name is Harlan, and they raised some concern about impacts to their property. So we found another alignment that works just as well, or maybe slightly better, that we think is going to do the job for us. And Stephen, did you have a question?
I believe both Bill and Joe had questions. Joe, you said a question.
I would appreciate, actually, if my colleagues would like it, you added the ASR pieces onto this, and I had thought that all the ASR work was on just the Woodland side, but I'm sure I'm just not tracking on things the way I should be. Could you give a minute of kind of where the ASR pieces are within the project now on the Woodland side, the Davis side, or the joint side, just to ground me in that, maybe help others too?
In order to implement an ASR program, it's going to require a modification to the water rights, because we don't have the authority right now to store water underground in either Davis or in Woodland. Either the CPG water or the 45,000 acre foot from the state. That's going to require a supplemental EIR. And the way we're approaching that is that we're going to do that supplemental EIR programmatically so that it will cover both Woodland and Davis in the future. And that will enable us to get the necessary permits from the regional board and to get the necessary water rights modifications from the state. When it comes to the actual physical testing of well 28, that's being done by Woodland and paid for by Woodland. But I think there's benefit to, both Woodland and Davis in terms of what we learn from those tests and the process as they go through it.
Okay.
That's the way it's set up, is that the broader environmental programmatic work is being shared by the JPA. The Woodland-specific work is done exclusively by Woodland.
Item 6 is specifically speaking to
Yeah.
the ASR. Maybe the questions for that item, you want to hold it to then, or?
Yeah, that's,
the way now?
yeah, I mean, is that under item 6, is that going to be as broad as this discussion?
Item 6 deals specifically with the supplemental EIR
Okay, yeah,
and the
then-
programmatic work.
That's where I'd like to talk more, so that's perfect. Thanks, Stephen.
That'd be great. Thank
Yeah.
you. Bill, can you
I'll wait.
you wait till then, too? Thank you very much. Please, unless there's more questions, please.
Okay, so
carry on.
just to continue in terms of a forecast looking forward, what we have planned focus over the next 3 months, we will be continuing to pursue state revolving fund low-interest loan and grant funding opportunities. We have a report, next item on your agenda, that talks a little bit more about the SRF opportunities. Obviously, continue to support Davis's Water Advisory Committee as needed. Next Monday and Tuesday, we will be traveling back to Washington, D.C. to focus on both securing the grant funding for the intake facility as well as pursuing grants for the broader regional project. And Director Saylor and Marble will be accompanying us on that trip. We continue to coordinate with PG&E, and the primary objective there is to not only make sure that they are positioned to provide us with the necessary power for both the intake facility and the regional water treatment facility, but also to make sure that we secure low-cost WAPA power at the intake facility. And because RD 2035 is already a WAPA customer, it's our intention to make sure that that benefit passes through to the agency as part of the joint intake facility. I might also mention an effort that's underway. I touched on it earlier with the relooking at the initial capacity of the project, but we're also going in and looking at level of treatment. We're looking at level of flexibility and redundancy, and we're looking at just flat-out cost-saving ideas, less expensive materials wherever we can. I think we've done a lot of that over the past several months, but we've focused on one area here and one area there, and we really haven't pulled all of those ideas together into one document. So that's the effort that's currently underway. It'll document all of the cost-saving activities that we've investigated and adopted, as well as ones that are still under consideration. We'll end up essentially with a menu. I'm not going to suggest that all of the items on the menu would be things that the agency would want to do. Some of them, are probably not wise long-term investment decisions, but I think it'll demonstrate to folks that we've looked at everything, and we've made good, solid, rational decisions with respect to which cost-saving measures we're adopting and which ones we're not adopting and why. And that should be available within a week or so. Environmental and permitting. I mentioned the realignment of the Davis treated water pipeline. That's known as the Harlan bypass. We have to complete the environmental assessment, initiate the property appraisal. We'll continue the implementation of the aqueduct storage and recovery work plan for Woodland, and we'll continue to work on our water quality permits both with the regional board and with the California Department of Public Health. Land and right-of-way acquisitions, again, continuing to pursue the necessary rights-of-way with the railroad, with the various landowners, and with CPG. Later on in your agenda, you have a report on the regional water treatment facility site, so we'll need to complete the purchase of that site from the City of Woodland at the appropriate time, and make sure that title is secured by the agency. In terms of design, we're coming up on a milestone with respect to the joint intake facility. It's scheduled to 100% design is scheduled to be completed this July. We're in the process of completing the regional water treatment facility site fill design, and the award of that contract is anticipated in the July timeframe. It's something that is coming before the Woodland City Council in early July for consideration to decide whether they want to award that contract or wait for the agency later in August. And we will continue the efforts to dewater the site prior to the award of that contract. Any questions on that?
Any questions?
None?
None.
This is just to wrap up the table that you saw last month. Again, to remind the board that our total capital costs are now $293 million, down from the $337 million that was our previous estimate. And that includes about $14 million that has already been spent. So this is since inception through the completion of the project. And finally, the scheduled milestones on the project. We remain on schedule to issue the final request for proposals for the DBO contracts in December. Anticipate receiving the proposals in next April, and an awarding of the contract in September of 2013. We can accomplish that and keep those tasks on schedule. We will remain able to complete the project in August of 2016. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Questions? Joe?
Yeah, Dennis, if you go back one slide, Davis portion, 140, but that includes then what's been spent to date. If 14 million has been spent to date,
6 million, 6.5 million, something like that.
6.5 million or so. So, kind of the cost going forward for Davis is more in the low 130s. And Paul, you might even have other ways to be looking at that, but
And that's also with local facilities. So if you back that out, if you back local facilities out, it's 125.24. And if you back out the 6 million, it's 119 or 120. Let's round it.
yeah, there you go. Okay,
The local facilities are designed are the facilities that both Woodland and Davis are going to have to make to their distribution system in order to accept the treated surface water.
Good. All right.
It's a bargain.
Better than it was.
Just making some comparisons. Yes. All right. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing nobody from the public, we'll move on to project financing update.
Yes, you have a memorandum in your packet. I briefly touched on it in my project update presentation. I think that the takeaway message with this item is that we have an opportunity with the state revolving fund applications to update them. They have a application period that's open through July 1st, so we want to take advantage of that in two ways. We want to update our project to better align our justifications with the funding categories that they've identified, and we also want to take the opportunity to reflect our current capital costs in those applications. So that effort's underway, and we will be submitting those revised applications within the next week to 10 days. Once we do that, we've just got several meetings set up with the staff that manages that program, and we want to go meet with them and get their best advice as to how to keep moving our projects up the priority list.
Question?
I've just one kind of question comment. When we were back in Washington, D.C. Previously, we had talked about the two state revolving funds and some opportunities with the additional clean water, what was it called?
But there's the
Safety.
drinking
Water Act revolving, it's confusing because you have the Drinking Water Revolving Fund and the Clean Water Act Revolving Fund, which more related to discharge. But they were giving us some mixed signal that maybe there were some ways we could get into that funding as well. Are we pursuing that
Yes.
actively?
Yes, that's actually touched on at the bottom of page 1 of the memo, and it's one of the things that in setting up the meetings with the staff that manages these programs that we've indicated we want to talk to them about. We've confirmed that the authority exists, so we want to find out how at the administrative
Okay.
level that actually works. And it is a bit confusing because you have the drinking water SRF, which is normally what this type of project would be the source for funding for this type of project, but we have the opportunity with the wastewater benefits to potentially tap into the clean water SRF as well.
And much more available funds
That's-
in the latter, which is why we pursue that.
Paul, you had comments?
Yes, I just wanted to add one thing. So Paul Novatso, I'm here as your JPA treasurer, and I just wanted to note on this that the financing that updates that you've had previously and the work that's been done has primarily been focused on sort of a Plan A bond financing that both cities have been looking at collaboratively, but also on their own. The ability to go to the State Revolving Loan Fund would represent a significant benefit in terms of the cost of capital. And so this would be favorable even relative to the rate assumptions that have been built into our respective rate models.
Paul, along those lines, just for public consumption, I've heard the numbers thrown around, but what are the interest rates and the terms of the state revolving funds?
I don't have them off the top of my head. I believe they're closer to the sort of 3% range as opposed to the 5 and 6% range. We've also looked at them previously. However, up until very recently, we thought the State Revolving Loan Fund would really be 20-year amortization, so you have to look at the overall interest and what it does to cash flow and rate impacts. And very recently, we've learned that there might be an opportunity, particularly as a joint regional project, to access a 30-year amortization period, which actually triggers a favorable rate impact relative to 30-year tax-exempt bonds. And I think that's the point, and that's also why the water agency is listed as a lead agency to really pursue the funding as a joint regional opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
And we certainly hope our Davis partners are well aware that the regional issue there is critical in the state revolving fund.
Paul, this 30-year amortization, is that a discretionary act on the part of state, or is that something we need to be advocating to
Go ahead.
achieve, or is it?
I'm probably not the person in the room most familiar with the State Revolving Loan Fund. I do know, it's my understanding that typically it's a shorter loan period, i.e. the 20-year. We had been informed previously, and others that have had experience, that it's possible to apply for a longer, but maybe 25-year, with marginal benefits. But we believe that some new guidelines from the state on this funding source would allow for even more extended amortization. I don't know if Dennis or Jacques might have better firsthand knowledge.
Actually, that's correct. In fact, at our last visit to Washington, D.C., we learned about a relaxing of the rules and the opportunity for an increased amortization period. So that's part of what we need to follow up on here in California, is exactly how they propose to implement that new authority and to take advantage of it if and when they make it available. So that's another topic that we want to pursue once we send in our revised applications.
So this decision-making body, what decision-making body would determine that the longer amortization is appropriate?
The federal government, who funds the SRF and provides the funding to the state, has changed their rules, and they now allow for up to a 30-year amortization period.
Okay.
And so the question is, with that new authority or that relaxed amortization period, how is the state intending to implement?
Okay. And is that the Department of Water Resources or the Department of Finance, or who makes that call?
It's the
Wasn't it EPA?
California Department of Public Health on the drinking water SRF, and the state board on the State Water Board for the clean water SRF. I get my acronyms.
Simple as can be.
In your meetings coming up next week in D.C., you'll meet with probably 3 of the individuals that we spoke to that actually were pursuing this information since we've left, and we're also volunteering the information and giving us suggestions as to what are some of the means by which we could cobble together the necessary funds that were favorable from a term basis and an interest basis.
I would just add there, and certainly, I think, Don, it's appropriate you bring that up, because the county is on our side on this thing, and we really need that as we get right into this, trying to figure out how we access those funds. We ought to make sure that we've got the full support possible from the county.
We definitely will do that.
Good.
Great.
Stephen?
Yes, Joe.
I just wanted to ask, I guess to Paul, maybe Dennis too. So I like hearing that the interest rate opportunities are there, and that we might be getting down in 3% range instead of 5 or 6 for at least big pieces of the financing. But I have no idea how that translates into, project dollars. So I think it'd be nice in the near future to be running this and be able to say that's a $5 million savings or a 1 or a 10. I have no idea. So are we planning on doing that? And you may have done it already, and I realize these are tricky numbers to release, and we, in certain circumstances, we don't want to because they're speculative. But
just to clarify, so it doesn't impact the project costs as you were just presented, but in terms of the financing vehicles for the project, I think it would be possible. We'll have to also check with Davis in terms of where they're at with their updated rate study, but certainly previously and more recently in Woodland, we've been doing sensitivity of the rates to the different interest assumptions and all the different financing that we've been looking at. I think the key is here the importance of the Clean Water Agency as a JPA to be the lead on the state revolving loan opportunities that are there, while both cities are still looking at all the contingencies. We can provide that as early as the next meeting. I think you'll get a budget update that would be part of your regular quarterly update, and we can shed some more light on that.
So I think that's extremely important to get into the Davis Water Advisory Committee and the water rate study. I'm guessing that's happened already, but
Well, it is a bit of an iterative process. First of all, we're going to need to figure out how much of the total project costs, how much SRF funding is available, and then there's going to be and I think all of the financial experts and advisors that have looked at it all agree, and Paul's that the SRF funding is by far the cheapest financing vehicle that's available. But then when you figure out how much you're actually going to be able to obtain, then you're going to have to structure the rest of your debt around that, and then you have several choices. You can spread it out to knock down the peaks of the rate increases. It depends on how quickly each of the cities would like to get caught up and pay for it, or whether you want to spread your rate increases out over a longer period of time. And those are all choices that kind of go back and forth and work iteratively with how you structure the rest of your debt.
okay.
And the fact is that this is a highly competitive fund, the drinking water SRF, and difficult to access. We're doing everything we can, but the fact is it's a very difficult fund to access. Which is why we're really trying to pursue that second SRF, because they're much easier, but you have to have the nexus there. We believe we have it, but convincing folks that we do. We know it's our discharge water that's the issue. There ought to be a nexus, but it's a That's a hard sell. I mean, I think that's the reality.
I mean, have they ever given revolving loan funds on the clean water side based on a water supply project having a benefit to discharge issue?
When we were in Washington last time, we were told that there's the mechanism is in place, the authority is in place to
do
have
it.
that cross-funding take place.
Okay.
Make the nexus, make the sell.
Squeaky wheel.
Well, we
It's going to be
should have-
squeaky.
We should have named this agency Woodland Davis Clean Water and Discharge Agency.
So, do I need to do anything else, or can I be assured that the Davis rate study group is as up-to-date as possible on the ins and outs of different financing options here that could affect their rate study?
Diane.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and speak to that if I could, Mr. Cavoza. I've been working with Diana Jensen to assure her that what she brings before our Water Advisory Committee group has whatever the JPA has available on their side, and then input that into the rate model. And so when we have the information that explains the difference between these different scenarios, we will be able to run those. Certainly the intent is to bring different scenarios in front of the Water Advisory Committee and show them where the sensitivity or nuances are, and also gives them some of the guidance or experience that Woodland learned when they went through their rates also. Their
Perfect.
rates.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Just a comment.
Yes.
Yeah, I understanding how the grants and things work, unless we have a project, we have no application. Is that true?
Yeah, at some point, they're going to want to make sure that we are committed
That
to
we
building
actually
a
have a project? And that means that both cities actually have to have a funding stream to finance the project? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I think our commitment to our ratepayers was, yes, we're adopting these rates, but this is the top rate. If we get access to other funding, that rate will drop back. We don't have to approve the highest rate. We can approve a lower rate. So I think that's where you can go with this. I know it's confusing to some people because they want to have some certainty about what it's going to be, but the reality is until we have a project and find out actually about things like the state revolving fund, we don't have an application.
You're correct, Director Doty. The process is you file your application, you receive a determination that you're in an eligible category for funding, and then there's a process where you're going to have to demonstrate the sufficient revenues to pay back the loan amount, and that's going to rely on the rates that the cities have in place at that time. I don't think it's at a critical juncture yet. I think that the schedule that we're on will allow for that, but at some point, you're absolutely right. We'll have to be able to show that the cities of Woodland Davis have the wherewithal to pay back the loan.
So I think caution would dictate that you need to plan on the project that you can finance without outside assistance. If you get the outside assistance, that's good. If you get the loan, that's good. If you get a grant, that's even better. But I don't know if you can count on it.
Yeah, just to clarify, I don't think anybody is counting. In fact, our rates, I think in both jurisdictions, are essentially based on what we believe we can deliver. But as you said appropriately, we've always said that if we can get favorable financing, ultimately the bids for the project are going to dictate. And so this just presents a very, I think, real and more potential opportunity to favorably impact the rates through one of several, i.e. some favorable financing. So we're not counting on it. Neither city should be building a rate model that assumes it.
Right.
But then part of the difficulty is, again, in the communication, which is there's a range of rate impacts, but the further we go through this process with favorable feedback, the more likely it is that neither city would have to implement rates that approach the max rates that would otherwise be required through straight debt financing.
Right. Well put. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Seeing no further questions, any public comment on this item? Nobody's jumping forward here. Okay, we'll move
I
on.
think they all went to Davis.
Stephen?
We'll move to item
Stephen?
4. Yes.
A comment on this item. Bill Marble raised the notion of county support and interest in participating in identifying funding streams and advocating. The Board of Supervisors on Tuesday approved 4 projects to submit to this coalition, Delta Coalition, and the top project was this one. And since we knew that this agency is submitting the project as a request, we are signing on as a co-sponsor. And if there are further specific numbers or specific approaches that the county can play a role in advocating on behalf of the agency, we would like to know that. And we have, as you know, I think, ongoing interactions with the state government and federal government on Delta issues. So we're very interested in mobilizing all of the county's advocacy efforts in support of the project.
Actually, if I could just jump in, to follow on Director Saylor's comment, we actually did file the application, and a copy of the project description is attached to your agenda item number 3. And I understand we might be invited to actually make a presentation to the coalition group in the next several weeks. I wanted to thank Jacques for his help in shepherding that through.
Who is the coalition?
I guess it was what was the group that pulled it together? The Natural Resource Council, or a group like that. And the idea was to pull together the interested stakeholders to attempt to identify projects and approaches that where consensus support could be achieved. So as the ongoing discussions about Delta issues continue, there may be, the theory was that there are some things that everyone could agree to, that there be projects that would meet about 11 criteria that we could all get behind and support. And these criteria were basically, there's not a lot of opposition to them, they're fundable, they're a short time frame, a lot of different criteria. And there have been 3 or 4 meetings that have taken place, and more to come.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll see. Maybe it's promising. Who knows, right?
You got to keep doing what you can do, and don't stop. All right, thank you. Item 4 is consider approval of amendment number 1 to the General Manager Services Agreement to include secretarial services beginning July 1st, 2012, and related termination agreement for secretarial services with the City of Davis.
I'm going to cover that item, Mr. Chairman. To refresh, the board considered this matter at your meeting back, I think it was in April. Your current secretary, Ms. Melhalf, is retiring from the City of Davis at the end of this month, and as we proposed in April, what's coming to the board for your consideration is an amendment of your existing General Manager Services Agreement with Deemer Engineering to expand that contract to include secretarial services, and then Deemer Engineering concurrently would employ Ms. Melhalf after her retirement from the City of Davis to have a somewhat seamless transition there on secretarial service. The hourly rate of $41 would remain the same as it is now. You're currently paying to the City of Davis. You would just continue paying that same amount to Deemer Engineering. In April, when the board considered this matter, you directed staff to go back and talk to each of the 2 cities and their city managers and explore the opportunity and availability of other existing qualified city employees to perhaps perform secretarial services through the city if there was, if that could, for example, avoid a layoff of somebody or something. In the last couple of weeks, that inquiry has taken place, and between the 2 city managers, and unable to find anybody who was available and qualified to serve in this role. So we're back before you to recommend approval of the proposed contract amendment that's in your packet. One thing I should add is just to be clear, Dennis Deemer, because of his interest in Deemer Engineering Incorporated, he's here today on this item, not as your general manager, but as a business person with an interest in this item. So if you have any questions of Dennis, understand he's in a different capacity on this item. But that said, staff does recommend that you approve amendment number 1 to the agreement to add secretarial services and then to concurrently terminate the agreement we have with the City of Davis for secretarial services, both of those to take effect on July 1. Any questions?
I have a comment.
Start with Marty.
Sure, just a quick question. I'm willing to bet Lynn doesn't get $41 an hour, so there's some overhead included in this. But upon retirement, what about health care benefits under PERS? Is it still the same overhead rate, or is this to Deemer Engineering?
I mean, let Lenan speak to it, but there are no health or retirement benefits associated with the proposed contract.
Yeah, but she'll still be covered under PERS, won't you, with retirement?
Correct.
Yeah, the contract with Davis should be okay. So this is not, this doesn't include overhead, then this is her salary plus X to Deemer Engineering?
The proposed $41 rate is as between Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency and Deemer Engineering. What the employment agreement may be between Deemer Engineering and Ms. Melhalf, we're not familiar with the details of that agreement and what I would assume that part of that $41 is going to cover overhead, but we don't have the details of that arrangement.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I'll move the item.
I do.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question. I spoke with both Mr. Deemer and with Lenan. I first of all want to say, and I think I would speak for all of us, Lenan has done an incredible job for this agency, and our only purpose in sending it back to the cities was to make sure that there weren't competent city folk that were potentially subject to layoff who could be put in that position for obvious reasons. What I spoke to Dennis and Lenan about today was both of our cities are facing substantial reductions in salary, benefits, other things, and layoffs for our people. And I thought it was appropriate to recommend that there be an approximately 5% reduction in this reimbursement to Deemer Engineering, which would be a reduction in Lenan's pay from what she's previously made, and both felt comfortable with that proposal. We're not here at the bargaining table, and it's a little uncomfortable to bring that up, but I think it's an appropriate thing to do, and would ask that you amend your motion, Joe, to be $39, something like that, instead of the 41.
I guess I'd like to know what, I mean, we're doing an independent contract with an outside contractor, so I certainly understand the sensitivity on our side. But this was acceptable to?
Yes.
Both sides, yeah, okay. I'm pleased then to move to approve with a 5% overall reduction.
A second.
Yep.
Moved and seconded. Any further comment? Any comment from the public? Yes, please come forward.
My name is John Hoover, longtime Woodland resident. These questions are not exactly what you're speaking of now, but it's come up that I just thought maybe I could ask them anyway, and I'll get out of your way. Two questions. You speak of a design, build, operate contract, and there's also a design, build, operate, maintain contract. Is it my understanding that there's no difference between the two contracts?
Well, the item before us is not.
I realize that, but I missed the public context. Unless you're going to do that again.
Let's find a place on the agenda where we
Yes.
can address that.
Yeah, maybe when we
Got to
Okay.
be something on the rest of this agenda where that would fit.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Technical advisory committee comments or correspondence.
Thank you.
We'll deal with it then.
Yeah, that's
Thank
good.
you. So, no comments on the item that's before us from the public. There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That carries unanimously. Thank you. That takes us to task order number 4, to consultant services agreement with the Environmental Services Association for Aquifer Storage and Recovery Program Supplemental EIR.
What happened to number 5?
That is number 5.
Oh, I skipped an item, didn't I?
No,
Skipped it.
you're,
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Item number 5 is consider approval of the resolution approving CEQA Amendment Number 2 to Project Final EIR. I was moving to item 6 too fast. Approving changes of the location of the Regional Water Treatment Facility site and making related findings.
Yes, Chair Souza and board members, the recommendation is for the board to adopt the proposed resolution approving CEQA Addendum Number 2. The original EIR that was adopted in 2007 contemplated a different site for the Regional Water Treatment Facility. We are suggesting that that site be moved primarily for improved access. Also, it's adjacent to a tomato processing operation, and overall, the new site that we're moving to is superior both from a access standpoint as well as some of these environmental factors. In order to move the site, the board needs to take action on Addendum Number 2, and as you read in your staff report, the addendum concludes that the changes in the treatment plant site will not result in any new or more severe impacts than those discussed in the 2007 EIR, so the staff recommendation is to approve the item.
Question? Bill?
we had talked at our last meeting, and I know you briefly spoke to this in your overall orientation earlier, but aerosols were an issue that one of the agencies that you had out there had expressed. Is that resolved? Because in the CEQA that we're adopting, it indicates no change in the aerosol component.
I think that we've got an increased comfort level in our discussions with CDPH. We have a better understanding of their concerns and what they're going to require. I think the fact that we're proposing to move the site further north will help us. They are likely to want to explore mitigation, further mitigation measures with us, which may include covering some of the facilities. They indicated in our meeting when we met with them in Sacramento that we are likely going to be that we will be required to monitor, and so what we're planning to do to respond to that is to start up a monitoring program here in the next couple of months, where we can go out and collect baseline data to see what is leaving, what if anything is leaving the wastewater treatment plant site now, and how far it's being transported, and then we'll be able to build a monitoring program tailored to that baseline data once the project is completed and goes into operation. So I think, in short, Director Marble, we can expect to continue to explore with the Health Department physical mitigation measures as well as ongoing monitoring to make sure that some of the concerns that they have are addressed.
Do their concerns need to be in any way legally incorporated into the CEQA that we're adopting?
I'd leave that to Mr. Shanahan.
No, that would be premature at that time, because that's really going to be an issue that comes out of the permitting between the agency and Department of Public Health.
I'm okay with that.
Yep.
It's almost like we're even over-regulated on this issue, in my opinion, because the CEQA clearly says 1,000 feet is the normally considered perimeter, and beyond that, there's no
and that's
issue,
our
and we're beyond
environmental
it.
expert's conclusion, and for purposes of the agency, that's what we're relying on for our CEQA analysis. Once we go through our permit process with Department of Public Health, a different standard may be applied, and
Okay.
more onerous permit requirements may be imposed.
I'm good.
Any further questions? Is there a motion to approve?
Move the item.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Comments from the public on this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous, and that moves us now to item number 6.
Yes, the recommended, the staff recommendation is to approve task order number 4 with Environmental Science Associates to prepare a supplemental EIR for the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Program. As we discussed earlier in the project update, this is the programmatic level EIR document that would allow both agencies in the future to utilize as they develop site-specific and project-specific ASR projects.
Questions, and I think there's some stored-up questions here, which seems appropriate for this storage question.
Yeah, my question is about order and how we're doing this, because this is an expenditure of $250,000 on a supplemental EIR, when we're not, at least in terms of this, of the science of ASR, do we become convinced first that ASR is going to work before we do the supplemental EIR, or do we have to do the supplemental EIR first? Help me a little with that, because this is a sizable expenditure.
Yeah, and I may ask Jim Yost to weigh in as well, but if you'll notice in the proposal, the work is not scheduled, this environmental work is not scheduled to start until October, and part of the reason for that is there are a number of tests underway right now with the at well 28, the water quality model that I talked about earlier, and there's also a hydraulic model that's being prepared to model the groundwater. So once we get the results back from those series of tests, I think we want to make sure that we're sufficiently convinced that the project will work, use that technical information and incorporate it into the supplemental EIR.
Okay.
Kind of the sequence.
And you wouldn't begin the supplemental expenditure then until you have those results, is that correct, Jim? I know we're all very, very encouraged and hopeful that ASR is going to work, and I know Roseville's using it much to their advantage, but I just want to make sure we're not putting the cart ahead of the horse.
What you say is absolutely true, and we'll be doing the geochemical modeling. Matter of fact, it's underway right now, so we'll have a real good handle by the time Dennis states the EIR work would begin on what the interaction will be chemically and how that might impact operation of the system. We also will be conducting hydraulic testing of the aquifer to see how much water we could actually inject and extract from the groundwater system, and both of those pieces of information will be available before we start working on the EIR.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Follow-up?
Yeah, I mean, there's no active Davis ASR project at this point in time, right?
That's correct.
So I guess my question is, I'm even more hesitant from the Davis side to pay for a project-wide EIR on ASR when we don't have an underlying project that's part of it. On the other hand, I am, passionately in favor of ASR being added into the conjunctive use mix of this project. So I'm a little torn on here. I mean, I like the cost savings of doing it now and coordinating it and doing it with Woodland. So I wonder if you can help me out a little bit and feel a little more comfortable.
In order to proceed with an ASR project and say a specific project in the city of Davis, it needs to obtain a permit. You need to obtain a permit from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And in order to inject the water, you also need to have the water rights modified to allow for the storage in the aquifer at that site. So in order to get the permit from the regional board and in order to get the water rights modified, you have to do the supplemental EIR as a precursor to those two approval steps. So from that standpoint, the agency's thinking was that it would provide benefit to both Woodland and Davis in terms of having that fundamental environmental work completed, and would allow the cities to proceed with the individual projects under the cover of the EIR.
So we can do this level of environmental review and still not know the site where the ASR, the storage recovery, might take place.
That's right. but you
Still
would
might
be
end
able
up in
to,
Davis.
you'd be able to tier off of this supplemental work, and you would have the ability through the water right modification to more easily and efficiently develop your project-specific ASR project.
Okay. Comfortable.
Maybe Mr. Yost, Mr. Deemer, one of you can catch me up. I remember somewhere reading that we'd actually looked at 3 different sites for the ASR location. One was in, I think, well 28. The other was closer to the treatment facility, I think on the southern side of the treatment facility. And then the third was on the northern border of the city of Davis, a new well. So those have been evaluated from what standpoint? Just location?
That's a very good question, and the consideration that goes into where you site the ASR has to do with the underlying geology and how much water you can store and so forth, but it also relates very directly to the use of that water. And as it turns out, this water will be very beneficial to the city of Woodland to have it out in their distribution system. So rather than pumping groundwater to supplement the surface water, when the surface water gets reduced a bit or they meet capacity requirements in the summertime, they can pump ASR water and get high-quality water and therefore maintain a fairly high-quality water in the distribution system. If it was elsewhere, it would be a little more problematic for them to do that. So that's the major consideration that went into siting of this. When it became clear that Davis is interested in ASR, but likely is sometime in the future, then it focused more on what does Woodland need to satisfy their needs.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments?
Just a quick question.
Yes, Marty.
I'm sort of, maybe it's a technical question. Are you going to pump groundwater or surface water in there to test it? How are you going to test the hydrology and the mixing?
Sorry, what was your question?
Are you going to actually pump surface water into well 28?
When we do the tests,
Yeah.
no, it will actually be groundwater. And the tests we're going to be doing this fall, this late summer and early fall, will be using groundwater from Woodland's system, and we'll pump it into the ground. And the reason we're doing it is hydraulic testing, so it doesn't matter what kind of water it is. It just, we want to test how quickly it could move out in the system and how quickly we can extract it. Surface water will be injected ultimately in the project, and that's why we're doing the geochemical testing. We're getting water from West Sacramento. There's surface water, which will be very similar to the surface water from the Davis Woodland Water Supply Project, and we'll do the water quality interaction through a
That was my
geochemical
question,
model.
yeah, about how you're going to do that, because, you know, the groundwater is the same. How would you tell the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're going to get the surface water from West Sac. Okay, thanks.
And no further questions, no comments? Someone,
I'll move the item.
I'll second.
it's been moved and seconded. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously. That moves us to item 7, which is consider approval of task order to agency consultant services agreement with Kim Floyd Associates for public outreach in the fiscal year 2012-2013.
Yes, Chairman Susan and board members, this is a recommendation to continue services with Kim Floyd Communication for public outreach. Her current task order expires June 30th, and so what's recommended and before you is a task order that would carry through the next fiscal year through July of 2013.
Questions?
Did we already approve this amount in the budget?
This is,
This is
yes.
from the budget, the 121,000. Does Kim provide service individually to the cities or strictly to the JPA?
I'm sorry, Director Doty?
Does she provide service to either one or to either city under this contract in addition, or does she, this is only for the JPA?
This is through the JPA. but if she is doing work that's specifically for one city or the other, that is paid for by that city.
Okay.
And when it's a general JPA, Clean Water Agency task, it's split according to the JPA percentages.
Okay, thank you.
And the 120 includes both?
Yes.
Any questions of Ms. Floyd?
I'll move approval.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Public comment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously, too. Thank you. So item number 8 is consider approval of task order number 6 under West Jost Associates Agreement for fiscal year 2012-2013.
Yes, and this is to continue the program management and engineering services for the agency through West Jost for the coming year. You have an extensive scope of work document that's attached to your staff report that describes in detail all of the various work activities. There's a budget breakdown behind the scope of services, and the amount of the recommended task order is consistent with the budget that you approved last May, or this past May.
Questions?
Just one.
Yes.
And this would probably be directed to both you, Dennis, and to Jim. Items 94 under design include having Gilbert, Tech, and Stinson going to visit facilities of the DBO proposers, I assume to make some kind of inspection on those facilities. What I'm anxious to know is what really is accomplished by those inspections that you wouldn't already know by virtue of backgrounding you've done on these entities and organizations. Is that a necessary thing to do? And if so, why?
Well, I think it's something that we've included in the budget and in the DBO process for comprehensiveness. I think it goes to another level of detail. In the inspection is not just an inspection of the physical facilities, but it's actually an opportunity to talk to the managers and the engineers and the operators at the facility to learn firsthand about the relationship that they have with the operator and how well they're doing and what issues or problems they might have. So it's just an opportunity to go down to another level to help sort out the different strengths and weaknesses of the proposers. It's something that we probably could and should reconsider when we get to that point in the process as to whether or not we really need to do that.
I guess, and I'm not knowledgeable. That's why I'm asking the question. I've never been through a DBO process of any kind, much less something of this magnitude. And I know the firms that we have qualified are worldwide renowned firms, and I'm just trying to figure out what more are you going to accomplish by that site visit really than that you wouldn't have been able to do in another fashion. And
it just gives us an opportunity to talk directly with the owner and any issues or problems, ask them the question, if you had to do it over again, would you put something different requirements or restrictions or, in the actual contract document. I don't know, Jim, if you have anything further to add on that. It's probably something that, as I said, we can and should.
I being in the healthcare field, I know that we do tests sometimes that perhaps don't need to be done based on judgment. But for legal reasons, we have to do them, and I'm just not sure where this sits in the mix. So.
I don't believe there's any kind of a legal context to it, but what I envision happening, these teams are going to come to us with proposals. And they're going to lay out our project in the way they think will work the best, will give us the best price, and meet our performance requirements. They may combine some processes together that are different than we've ever seen. We want to go see one of these facilities, talk to the people that have owned it and operated it, and get comfortable ourselves that this is really going to work the way they've described it. So I think that's the primary purpose for the, and I don't know, I guess I would say, Dennis, this is an optional task. If we determine down the road that we're very comfortable with the proposal that's before us and we don't need to make these visits, we certainly wouldn't do it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not trying to second guess, but I do question that area. So I guess when the time comes, knowing that it's authorized, I'm okay with, as long as we're not doing something more that we need to do.
I think that's a good way to describe it, as optional. And I think what we should do is, when we get to that point in the process, if we believe there's a need to do the more site-specific intensive visit, that we come back to the board and explain that in advance.
I appreciate the scrutiny that the question demonstrates and exhibits in looking through these tasks. I'm reminded, as I listen to the discussion of the Mondavi Center, when the procurement process was underway, no one had built such a facility at UC Davis, and they went through a process that it actually is somewhat similar, where they brought in teams of people who had designed such facilities in other parts of the country and were making their proposals, and they did do these visits, and one of the reasons that they did them was to determine that what had been represented was factual, both in what was in their interest was in understanding how the building, how the project actually worked, how the people involved in it had interacted to achieve this success, or and what they would do differently if they were going to be working on the thing again. So they were looking at the as-built condition rather than the as-promised or as-represented condition. So there was value in it in that condition, in that process, in that setting.
Good.
I would similarly add, I think it might be very useful for board members to visit not only a facility that's run through a private operation, but a facility that's run through a public operation, so that the similarities can be seen, if there are mostly that, or the differences if there are some of those.
I'm sure we could find something like that in Hawaii, maybe, or Australia.
We'll
Sorry.
report back, you and me, Marty. We have time on our hand coming up here.
I know.
Any further questions?
Move the item.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. This takes us to item number 9, which is consider approval of agreement with Jacob Associates for geotechnical engineering investigation and services.
Yes, Chair Souza, board members, there's actually two parts to this recommended contract. The first part relates to additional geotechnical investigations along the right-of-way pipelines. In further consultation with our geotechnical experts and also with the design, build, operate teams, we feel that more exploratory borings along the pipeline alignment will result in more certainty as to the existing soil conditions, less risk to the contractor, and therefore presumably lower prices. So we're recommending additional borings along the pipeline alignment. The second part of this agreement would be for geotechnical work at the new regional water treatment facility site, the northern ponds, as we described earlier. I would also note that this recommended contract exceeds the budget amount of $234,000 by $47,000. The reason for that is explained on page 2 of the staff report, but basically the budget assumed that the geotech drill rig could get in with truck-mounted equipment, and based on past experience, we think it's highly likely that they're going to need to use tracked equipment, and that's the reason for the extra cost. So I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention.
Questions?
Just had one question. This is perhaps a little different than the other contracts that we've approved tonight, this afternoon. And my question is this type of contract ever bid out on a just a straight bid process, or is this type of contract always done on time and materials the way I see it's constructed here.
These are, in the industry, considered to be professional services, and they're
Okay.
bid in this fashion as opposed to a low bid where you have a contractor.
Right.
Because they involve professional judgment and interpretation of the results.
Okay. I'm fine with it.
And Bill, if I could add, this firm through West Yost has previously been involved doing work on this project, so they come
I know-
with, okay.
I know that, and I know we don't choose our attorney or our dentist or our physician always based on lowest cost. I get it, but I just was curious
Yep.
to know if they're, I know we've had a good association with this group, but it never hurts to make sure that we're getting value for what we're doing.
Yes, Mr. Yost.
I can just add one thing. When we started developing the scope and budget for this task, we discussed it with Dennis and decided to move the contract directly with the agency. So they no longer will be a subcontractor in West Yost. They'll be working directly for the agency, and that did reduce
Cuts
the
out
cost.
that commission a little bit, doesn't it? Thank you, Jim, for letting us know that. I think that's appropriate. And I remember at Chair Souza's request, we took out the public communications component out of the West Yost proposal, and that saved the agency some money. And you've been flexible in that regard, and I think that's appreciated.
Any public comment on this item? Yes, please come forward.
Vijay Kumar, I'm here as a Davis resident and private citizen. Chairman Souza was looking at me all the time on the public comment, so I thought of coming and giving some feedback. This is a great idea to backfill that site before you start the construction, because it takes 6 to 9 months for the soil to compact and gives you a great foundation. Excellent idea. Just 2 days ago, I heard that some of the citizens telling me, what are you going to build, a water treatment plant next to a wastewater treatment plant? So I'm wondering whether how high is the water treatment plant location compared to the wastewater treatment plant, so that we can tell them that Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency never supplied wastewater to their homes. So I'm just curious whether Mr. Jimios knows that.
Height of the surface water project versus the wastewater treatment plant.
I'm sorry?
The differential in height between the surface water project and the wastewater treatment plant in the city of Woodland.
How much fill will we have on, I guess, on the water treatment plant site versus?
Yeah, lifting it above.
Yeah. Well,
Like 10 feet, isn't
the fill will be about 12 or 13 feet on the water treatment plant site.
So
So
it's-
it will bring it up, my guess would be 3 or 4 feet above the tops of the levees there, and the wastewater treatment plant is slightly below the tops of those levees. So that gives you a relative understanding of the elevation differences.
Yeah, is there any way we can make it at least 3 feet high? That's kind of our standard freeboard that we put in other projects. So we can positively tell residents that there is no chance that wastewater is going to a water treatment plant.
I think we can confirm the differential in height, but I think that we're going to be above that standard. We'll confirm that.
Okay, that helps me to explain to people that that will never happen. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
If I could add to that, between the wastewater treatment plant site and the water treatment plant site, for one thing, there's about a half a mile of physical separation, but also there's 2 floodplain levees around each of the facilities, and in between there is a channel of a couple hundred feet wide. So there's no connection physically between the 2 sites.
No further comments? Would someone like to move this item?
Move the item.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And I'd just like to note that I just recognize that we have within our audience here are the new general manager over utilities and development and operations from the city of Davis, Mr. Herb Niederberger. Niederberger. Sir, welcome. Next item, I will take Mr.
It
Hoover.
rhymes with Murderburger, I think, right?
Whataburger.
All right. Welcome to Davis.
I thought they changed that name.
The red rum, isn't it?
We did, but the locals don't forget.
Mr.
Sorry,
Hoover,
Herb.
Your question, would you like to state your question again concerning an item that we had prior?
His question was DBO versus...
Yeah, DBO
Yes.
operations.
This has to do with the difference between a DPO contract and a DPOM contract.
Great.
Is it agreed that they're the same thing?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is, it's the same. The operation, the private operator will also maintain the project for 15 years.
But the maintenance part is not part of the contract?
The maintenance is part of the contract.
Okay, very good. The other question I had has to do with the debt service on the bonds, or is that in a different position also?
Our finance director is gone, our treasurer. Debt service on the bonds for the project?
Yes. You mentioned, or he mentioned that there would be 20-year bonds, 25-year bonds, or 30-year bonds.
That's state revolving fund financing.
Yes.
Those aren't really bonds.
Those
That's
aren't bonds.
That's a loan.
That's a loan, yeah.
Okay.
And the bonds are generally 30-year bonds, but there
Okay.
has been, at least to my knowledge, some discussion of longer-term bonds, but we have not actually gone down that road to know exactly what the form of the financing we're going to have. We're only doing investigation at this point.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
John, when you rented instruments, musical instruments, were they including maintenance? That's why you asked.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I used to rent a violin a long time ago.
This takes us to item number 10, which is consider election of board chair and vice chair for fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2012. So,
This item is at the pleasure of the board. Staff has provided you with 3 alternatives and pros and cons associated with each.
everybody knows the 3 alternatives that have been proposed?
Yeah,
I can stay on as long as you want me.
Likewise.
We can take the 2 remaining board members with the knowledge that it rotates back to Woodland, which would make Mr. Marble chair and Mr. Cravoza vice chair, or we can wait until the 2 member agencies choose their new representatives to replace Ms. Doty and myself. It's your call, or our call, since I still do have a vote up here.
Well, I
So
think,
do you.
I know, and frankly, I think we're irreplaceable, but that's okay. Certainly, we have the best sense of humor. I think we should go with number 1 and just go ahead and do the election. The new people coming on, I think, are going to have both learning curves, even though I'm sure they've been tracking this. And I'd feel more comfortable handing over the reins of this agency to people who are very familiar with it and have been here for some period of time, certainly as Bill's been here from the beginning.
Any other comments from other board members?
Yeah, I'm trying to, how much time is left on your term? I mean, I think I do
So the swearing in of the new member of the city of Davis,
July 10th.
July 10th.
Same with me.
Right.
Well, that's technically not correct in terms of your term here. It's until the city councils, through the next step of filling all their various boards and commissions, which may happen that evening, or it may happen at a later city council meeting.
And we're going on vacation until the end of August.
And that's
so
why
it's not gonna happen
I just
till
wanted to
then.
make that point for our 2 outgoing directors, that it is important that you guys continue to serve, and we need a quorum for the board, and
That
so
presents a problem.
that process is really dependent on action by the city council, which could be into August.
That's a problem.
That's
Could
very
be.
interesting.
Right, I do
We have to
anticipate,
stay on until they appoint somebody.
yeah, I do anticipate that the city of Davis is moving forward with figuring out our appointments, so I do anticipate that it'll be either the July 10 meeting or the July 17 meeting at the latest, where we'll go through that process.
Don't want to put it off till 2014.
No, I know who's going to be replacing me also, but I don't know
Just
when. But I don't know when they're going to do the actual appointment. I don't know if they're going to do any business on the 10th.
I think we will probably do it in July.
Will they do it?
Yeah.
They should, because these JPAs are continuing to meet.
Yeah. From my perspective, it's critical that we have a functioning chair. That's then that we not have lag time in the chair. And we don't meet again until August the something or other, the 20th, and we're at some crucial junctures as an organization.
Appointments should be done by then, but, if they're not, we can just continue.
Yeah.
But we should elect the chair and vice chair tonight, I think.
I have no problem. In fact, I'm very happy with rotating the chair and the vice chair to Mr. Marble and to Mr. Cavoza.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. With Mr. Marble going into the chair position? Or?
Yes.
Yes. The rotation goes from Woodland to Davis, so now it's Woodland's turn to serve as chair.
Yeah, and he's the remaining Woodland member, so.
But the chair, the chair term that you would serve, Davis would be serving, Stephen would be going to 2013?
No.
To June?
1st.
He would be going to July 1st.
Oh, so we should be rotating it on a year.
Basis.
Okay, so when you say 2013 here, I see. Okay, that's for the next term, not the current term.
Assuming you're still here and the vice chair, it would rotate probably to you. Back to Davis.
Okay. Yeah, I think it is better to rotate it now. Okay. Yeah, I mean, basically we got a little bit off because Bill, you went for about a year and a half, right? And then we kind of got synced up. Yeah.
Well, that's because we started in September.
Right.
Yeah. Right. No, understood. Yeah, I think that does make sense to shift it now. We don't want to hiccup over the summer. There's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot going on.
That's my feel. Even though I will gladly serve as long as you want me to serve.
Well, and I'll serve until they actually officially make the appointment. And even though I know who it's going to be, I'm not sure when they're going to act. So I'm available, but no, clearly, as soon as they appoint, I'm out.
Good.
So there's a
motion
and I
for
seconded
chair
the
for
motion.
Bill and vice chair for Joe.
Okay.
Any further comment on that motion? Any public comment on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Mr. Marble?
Oh, he takes over
We
July
just have
1st.
one more item to cover on the agenda real quick, if we could. That's the long-term calendar, and that's item number 11. I just wanted to point out that July, it does not look like there are any time-sensitive items that need the board's attention in July, and at the board's pleasure, you could decide to cancel that meeting and have your next meeting in August.
Great. Any comments or questions on the long-range calendar?
That looks like a plan.
Correspondence, item 12. Pardon?
Did the board want to cancel the July meeting?
I'll move we cancel the July meeting, yeah.
Okay.
Any comments on the, actually, is there a second?
I'll second that, but I want to just request, Dennis, that when we return from Washington, as we know who your appointment is, and as we know who our appointment is, as that's publicly announced, I think it's important that right away there be some
Yes.
orientation as to what happened in Washington and where we go, because we are at some really time-sensitive locations on funding and other things, and we want everybody up to speed. So
That's a very good point, and we'll make sure we get that word out.
Ms. Floyd, you got note of that, a press release on the new appointees and probably a press release on activities of Washington would be very good.
Yeah, I guess I want to push back just a little bit and talk a little bit more about this July meeting idea. I mean, if we do have our new appointees, I mean, it's 50% of the board that's going to come on.
We can change it.
I mean, the idea of either doing a board meeting on the 19th to orient them and really bring them up to speed, given that there's going to be big stuff happening in August and September, makes a lot of sense to me. So we could either do that as an orientation, of the new members in July, which I think should be a fairly significant activity, of the general manager, or we could have a full meeting with actually maybe a bit of an expanded update, or maybe even some briefings for them before. But I think I just want to make sure we don't say we're good. We'll see you all in August.
I think that's a very good point, and the reason for bringing it up is to get direction from the board. If you would like an expanded session for new board members, we could certainly do that. It's really whether you'd want to do it that way or individual briefings.
Yeah, I mean, my gut would be to have a meeting on the 19th, bring in the new board members, have some expanded updates, particularly with regard to Washington, D.C., and the kind of the coming things in the next couple of months. I assume both of them are going to be getting steeped in all kinds of new council things, and so a meeting would be a great way to get them to focus. For us, Bill, it's going to be a bit of review.
Well, 19th is not doable for me. I'm at a board of directors meeting for the League of Cities.
Okay.
That entire day. So, but it could I'm certainly willing to go earlier, and I think we ought to just look at it as things go, and you and I can confer on it without any Brown Act issues of any kind. Yep. So let's powwow with Dennis.
Well, then I'll withdraw my motion, and you can just go ad hoc.
Yeah, just figure out whether you need it or not. You can always cancel it. And frankly, from my perspective, it would be more valuable for your new board members to do one-on-ones with the project, the general manager, and with the project engineer. I think they would gain a lot more because they could have direct questions. And I also think providing them with some of the last few updates that we've had over the last year would also give them some material to read that would give them great background as to the cost, to the fill site, to the things that we've been doing, so that they are quite aware of them. But the most valuable resource are you two and staff to be able to go just fully ask them questions, and Mr. Shanahan, for that matter, any legal matters when it comes to the water rights, the purchase agreements, the operations side of the DBO, the whole service contract. Any of those questions we could sit here and they'll never get them answered maybe in the 2 hours, but extended time with you will be more valuable than, in my opinion.
Yeah, if I could just comment, Mr. Niederberger coming online in the city of Davis, we'd already anticipated that it would be beneficial for some sit-down time to go over some of these key issues for city of Davis, and might be prudent at that time also if there was an opportunity for a new council member that would be coming on this board to also get some information. So that would be another way to educate them.
Yep, totally agree. I mean, but the first document that anybody coming to this board should read is the bylaws. I think that's probably one of the most important documents to read.
So if I understand the board's direction, we'll leave the calendar as is, and I'll confer with the chair and vice chair as we get closer to the date as to the need for the meeting.
That's good.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
So there will be no action on this item then?
No, motion is withdrawn.
So motion has been withdrawn, no action on the long-range calendar. It will be left to the chair and the vice chair to determine whether there will be a July meeting. Good. And the process by which orientation will occur for the new members of this board.
Great. We've gotten halfway through the conversation already here, so
there you go.
There'll be a conclusion.
That takes us to item 12. Is there any correspondence?
None to report.
Technical Advisory Committee comments.
I don't have any.
Just as a quick update on some of the activities in Woodland, our storage tank and pump station in the south part of the city will be taken to council on July 3rd for authorization to bid. Likewise, a number of the actions taken here will be taken to our city council, such as the approval of the alternate land for the site, and also for the site filling. We're proceeding with the anticipation of joint participation in the site filling, but the city may need to unilaterally move forward just to assure that we're able to complete the work within this construction season, that we don't have expensive dewatering continuing for a number of months. We also have 2 of our monitoring wells we've just constructed that'll be necessary for the hydraulic modeling for the ASR work. Those have been installed in the last month or so. And also well 28, the ASR well should be ready for doing the hydraulic modeling by the end of the calendar year.
Thank you. Just to note for the record, I didn't make this note, but Mr. David Phillip is here for the university, and just for the record, in case I'm not being taken
I'm happy to contribute.
Thank you. Board, that takes us to board correspondence and actually board member comments.
Yeah, haven't written any letters.
No.
I have a few comments I'd like to make before one closing comment that I'd like to make. I want to report on a meeting that was held by the Water Resources Association of Yolo County Technical Committee last month, or maybe it was earlier this month. Jacques, you can tell me the date, I'm sure, off the top of your hand, but we had an incredibly important, I feel, presentation and discussion on nitrates in drinking water. And this issue is a huge one in relation to the water that we are trying to go off of. And I was, and I won't give you the presentation because it was a couple of hours, but I want to highlight just 3 things that were eye-opening, and I wish our public were still here to hear this. At Yolo County wells, 20% of the public water supply in Yolo County has nitrates above acceptable standards. 15% of newly constructed private wells contain nitrates above acceptable standards based on the amount of sampling that's done. 3 wells in Davis are out of limit, above limit in nitrates, and 6 wells in Woodland are above limit in nitrates. I think those are facts that are not well understood by the public, certainly, because we've touted the connect between our discharge, but this is drinking water, and it is an increasing issue, and it's not diminishing. So I think that we should note that, and that's all I'll say about that. Then we had a very, I think, timely meeting as part of the Water Resource Association, and Director Saylor was there, but Supervisor Provenza provided some very timely information about the actions the county is trying to take in relation to the Delta and our positioning in the Delta. And I think this is just my own feeling, but I think having the county on, it's a little uncomfortable to have 2 people of the stature that we have on the ends of this table who are part of the board but not voting, and we all know why that happens, but I think it's just tremendous that we're here, all of us together, because Don is doing an incredible job trying to make sure that we're getting the full resources of the county. That's important, and to hear from Supervisor Provenza, and these are issues that affect this agency to a very great deal, that brings me to one additional comment that I'll make as a result of a meeting I attended Tuesday afternoon. The Sacramento Metro Chamber not only sponsors the Cap to Cap, but they have an ongoing water flood committee whose purpose is to make sure that policies and priorities in the region year-round are kept where they ought to be, and that everybody that's part of that greater group can be together on it. And a comment was made Tuesday afternoon that really sobered me. One of the co-chairs of that committee made the comment that, and I'll just say he or she had heard the deputy director of the state board, the state water board, say everything will be on the table, including water rights. And that was a very sobering remark, and we all heard it together. We didn't hear it from the deputy director, but we heard one of our co-chairs make that statement, and I think that ought to give us all pause. I'm glad we're part of NACWA. We're part of SACOG by virtue of our organizations. We're part of the Northern California Alliance, the Water Alliance. These regional organizations that we're participating in, I think, are incredibly important for this organization, and we need to keep our heads well oriented, because things that could be in the works. I'm not a naysayer. I think you all know that, but I think we need to be very cognizant of what's happening, and that's all I'd like to say about that.
Any other board comments? Yes, Marty.
Current chair Susan, I sit on the Habitat Conservation Plan board also, and Supervisor Provenza's there, and he expressed some of the same concerns about a different aspect of the Delta planning, which is the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, which overlaps our plan by 15,000 acres, something like that. And some of the mitigations for their aquatic plan, well, they're adding some terrestrial species, but some of their mitigations include widening the bypass, moving the west levees, and flooding it more often or more frequently to provide habitat for endangered species, specifically fish. And he's concerned that we need to get our habitat conservation plan finished and adopted before they begin the serious push to modify their access and their mitigations. It's the same problem here. I think Bill says that he's an optimist, and I used to be an optimist, but after watching for the last 8 to 10 years, I'm not really there anymore. And I think that we need to be aware not just of the potential problems of interacting with the Delta group, but also the fact that the amount of money and the amount of political power that is going to be pushed to get them what they want. And they don't really care about whether Woodland, Staten, Davis gets their water. They don't really care if we have a habitat conservation plan. And they sure as hell don't care about the species of concern that we have. They care about the water. And they're talking about the water rights. They don't care about our water rights. They care about their water rights. And we need to be aware of that. I wouldn't trust them, and I certainly wouldn't collaborate with them. You can collaborate if you want to, but I'm sorry, guys. Watch your back, grab your wallets, and don't drop the soap, because these guys are not going to be honorable. They are voracious.
Any other board comments? I have one quick one before.
Yeah.
Go ahead. And then I'll go.
Thanks. I believe there are 6 public documents now that relate to Davis's consideration of partnership with West Sacramento. And just so for the record, if anyone would like to see those and review those, to in the name of transparency and everybody knowing all the information that's out there, Diane, I'm sure you can forward them. There's been a couple emails that have them all bundled up together, and I'd invite people to do that. And I also just wanted to say it on the record at this meeting. Anything else you want to add?
I'll just give my email address in case anyone would request a document.
Are they posted on our website by now, too?
Not all of them are, no.
Okay.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to request from me, dphillips@cityofdavis.org.
Yeah, that's funny. I was just going to talk to that.
Okay, sorry.
The 6 documents are about 9.3 megabytes of a zipped file, if you want a zip file. First one is the BKS input on the West Sacramento water option. Second one is the Ed and George comments, Ed Schroeder and George Shabana-Glass's comments on the West Sac. The third is the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency assessment. This is technical memorandum 1. There's 4 technical memorandums. The second technical memorandum is the Davis assessment. The third is the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency cost, and the fourth is the Davis cost. Bottom line, if you read all these documents, we're on the right path here at the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency as a collaboration. It is the most cost-effective, environmentally correct path to go for surface water for our 2 cities, in my opinion, reading those documents so far. Yes.
So perhaps Diane can email to us or transmit to at least those of us here at the dais all of these materials that have just been referenced.
You know, and especially if they should all be posted, Diane. And in fact, I wasn't able to. I didn't get the most recent email that was sent because they're so big. So I think they've got to be posted, and then.
It was my understanding, though, that the Water Advisory Committee needed to get the last couple of them before they were actually posted, and I'm not certain if that step occurred quite yet or if it'll be tomorrow morning. I know it's just imminent that happened.
Okay. So as soon as that happens, I think everybody in the
They're all posted now?
in this room should get it. Yeah. They're posted now?
I don't think they're fully posted. I do know that I got them real early this morning and unzipped them and started reading them. And in the comment from the city manager, Mr. Steve Pinkerton, they were going to be released tomorrow to the Water Advisory Committee, and I think at that point they were going to be publicly posted for all to go through the hundreds of pages and read all of the documents. I think probably the one document that I read that was the most eye-opening for me was the actual analysis and comments by the 2 professors that we've had as consultants all along, who raised considerable amount of questions. And the one question that I've raised and they raised in their comments is, this is a lease. There's no discussion of a buy-in. There's no discussion of an ownership cost. There is no evaluation of that ownership cost. And that's a cost that we don't have to bear in this agency. It's a benefit that we get as an agency. We own it. So my last comments on that matter.
I doubt it.
It's called passion.
Final comment here. We all are aware that despite tremendous service to our members will not be returning to this agency. We have, I'd like the other board members, if you would, to come down just to express our appreciation. And Stephen and Marty, you just stay up there.
We'll stay here. They're going to throw something at us, I know.
Yeah.
This is a pie thing.
We'll have you come down in just a second, but stay up there for as long as any of my colleagues wish to make any comments. It's been my privilege, really, to serve with both of you since this agency was begun. And I think I express all of our appreciation for that service. It's been remarkable and enjoyable and challenging and wonderful, really. And you have been stalwarts in terms of looking at every item that has come on the agendas, and we sincerely appreciate the service you've rendered on this board. We'll miss you and look forward to future opportunities for association. Any of my colleagues want to say anything? Welcome to if you'd like.
Stephen, you've been a fantastic mentor on water generally and this project specifically, so I thank you so much. Marty, it's been great getting to know you, and I know we're going to be running into each other. And to both of you, it's just I think back on my year and a half or a little bit more on this agency. I think to those closed sessions that we had as we figured out the purchase of the CPG water, and while I will not recount details of those closed sessions here, it was those sessions that told me just how passionate all the members of this board are about protecting the public interest, and the points that both of you raised and we all kind of came to agreement on, really defined, the benefits of two communities coming together and working very, very hard and very, very smartly for the benefit of our citizens. So thank you both, and I hope we keep hearing from both of you on many things.
The two of you are original members of a very wonderful and interesting collaboration, and one of the true measures of collaboration is if you're willing to dig in and try to see things from the other's point of view. All of the visuals of this JPA are really collaborative, from the fact that you rotate from one city to the next, that the chair is rotated, that your membership is 4 voting members and requires all parties to think through how to make things work. The two of you have epitomized the kind of members that are necessary to keep this kind of thing going. Both of you have dug into the analytical details, the complexities of this project and this organization, and both of your cities owe you a tremendous amount of gratitude for the work that you've done. I've enjoyed serving with you both here and in other places, and wish you the best.
I'll just kind of speak from the staff perspective. I think what we all appreciate is the fact that you do your homework and you respect the opinion of staff, but you dig into the details. So as a staff member, I know that's one thing we appreciate in the leadership you've provided to this group. Thank you for that.
Thank you, David.
Great. With that, if you'd both come down, we'd like to present you these plaques in appreciation of the service that you've provided to not only all of us, but to these two communities. Get all of us together? Yeah, let's do that. Let's all line up front here.
Yes, this is being published. All right. Thank you. One more. I'm putting it on the Facebook page first. You always beat me to it. Hold his phone. I'm just kidding. I have to get an iPhone. You need an correction for you. One more. Thank you. I got to keep one. Oh. Yeah, it's a great picture.
Got to come over to the Apple side.
Got to come over to the Apple. All right. This one has great marks. Ready? 1, 2, 3. That's a great picture. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Marty, please, you go first.
Not being one to pass up an open mic, I want to thank my colleagues for their kind words. This project and this Joint Powers Agency, I have to say, has shared my passion for conservation and for good stewardship, not only for the good public health, but also taking better care of the land and taking better care of our people. That it's shared it with the Habitat Conservation Plan. Those are my passions in life. As I said, and that was quoted in I was a tree hugger at one point, still am. And I know that the people who come after me on this board will continue with the guidance of the current membership to get us through this project. I look forward to 2016 and turning on this in my house or maybe someplace else where there's water that's coming from the Sacramento River. This has been a marvelous group to work with. The staff has been fantastic. The technical people, our consultants. It's been a dream, and I'm very appreciative of my opportunity to participate in it.
When we had a meeting almost, 2 3/4 years ago in the council chambers, City of Davis, joint meeting between both city councils.
Historic.
Very historic. I knew then that something was being started that would define our two communities, and I also knew then that there were far greater similarities between our two communities than there were differences. I also knew that I was going to be able to establish relationships with two members from the city of Woodland that I'll never, ever forget and always cherish, because it was important to me to have those relationships in concrete, or I could say not as fluid as water, so that whatever we did was not from an adversarial perspective, but was always from a collaborative, respectful perspective. And we've had that. I mean, we established that. Even the debate that we had that night about whether we should have more than 4 told me that we were always going to seek a opinion, a ruling, a vote that was totally together. And we've hardly had one of those. I think we've had one in all that time that it was not unanimous. It has been, in my opinion, probably one of the most wonderful things I've done in my life, because we're doing something that will live far beyond us. It's not for us. It's for, and it's not just for humans. It's far beyond that. In fact, what we're seeking to do is to protect species probably we'll never run into or have any association with. That is the bottom line of why we're doing this. It's not just for the clean water. It's to protect the delta and all that participates in that delta. And I think that's a legacy that we can be proud of, that we've established, and that those who fill the seats we're sitting in right now will continue to further. And I'm going to miss closing this door. It's one of the big doors I have left to close. I said to a friend today, I have 2 big doors left to close. Today's one of them, and before I leave the house, there's one more on Tuesday that I'll close. And I'm actually, I won't cry. I told my friend I would not cry here, because this to me has been a hard door to close. And I thank you, all of you, for the time we've spent with each other.
I'll move adjournment.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.